Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 253. Mount Longxiu, bastard. I've been waiting for a long time. You're finally awake. In the silent room, this voice was strange and distorted. If Chu Wanning could see, he would find his former disciple, gazing at him with a distorted smile, like a spider looking at the living creature that had fallen into its web. How was it? Did you sleep well? Chu Wanning did not immediately answer. He moved a bit and found that he had only recovered a small portion of his spiritual power. Moreover, his hands were tied by the immortal binding rope and his eyes were covered by a black ribbon. There was no use panicking at this time. Chu Wanning had always been fearless. He knew very well what kind of result he wanted, so he also knew how to deal with it calmly. In his 2 lives, he had only been at a loss in front of one person. Apart from that person, no one would make him panic. So, Chu Wanning stayed silent, slowly recalling the fragmented memories and the situation before he fell unconscious. Before his consciousness drifted, he had intermittently heard some conversations around him. Now he was trying his best to piece together those fragmented words. But at this time, the door to the secret room opened with a rumble. Nangong Lu had returned. He was holding a pile of fresh and juicy oranges. As soon as he entered, he shouted, "Close friend Gag, I picked the oranges. I picked the ones with small circles at the bottom. These are especially sweet." Before he finished speaking, he saw Chu Wanning on the bed. "Ah! Consort Chu Gag, you're awake." Hearing this name, Chu Wanning's originally very pale face became even more gloomy. Consort Chu Gag. Consort Chu? Then the so-called close friend Gag was. Shi Mei took the oranges from Nangong Lu, smiled and patted his head while saying, "You did well. But I have something to say to this Consort Chu. You go out first and play by yourself for a while. Can't I stay here and play? I can help you peel the oranges." "It's not good for you to stay." Shi Mei said, "There are some words that adults can listen to, but children can't." Nangong Lu muttered in confusion, then turned around and left. For a moment, the room was very quiet. Only the sound of breathing and the occasional crackling of candlelight could be heard. Shi Mei picked an orange and skillfully peeled it, removing the white strands. While he was doing this, he chatted with Chu Wanning casually. "Did you hear who that person was? You shouldn't be unfamiliar with his voice." After peeling the oranges, he brought them to Chu Wanning's lips. "Try it." These oranges on Mount Jiao were personally planted by Su Xuanglin. He's very proficient in this field, so they should be very sweet. Chu Wanning turned his face away. Shi Mei said slowly, "Look at you, throwing a tantrum as soon as you wake up." After a moment of silence, Chu Wanning asked coldly, "Where is he?" "Who?" "You know who I'm talking about." Shi Mei raised his eyebrows slightly. "You are asking about Mo Ran." Seeing that he was silent, Shi Mei smiled gently. "You really care about him. The first thing you ask as soon as you woke is about him. You don't even ask who I am. For someone who has trampled all over you for half your life, is he really worth it?" The blindfolded and bound man merely pursed his lips. The lines of his jawline became more and more haggard. Shi Mei stared at him for a while, feeling that the evil fire in his chest was gradually growing stronger. But he prided himself on being calm and would never do anything rash. People should eat gracefully, without showing their teeth and without leaving any residue. Eating like Taxian Jun who devoured flesh and bone together was too crude, leaving only an empty bowl before he could even chew the delicious food properly. That was like a reincarnation of a hungry dog and Shi Mingjing didn't like doing it like that. So, even though his lower body was burning, he still slowly poured fresh juice on his celestial vegetables and rubbed the texture of the meat. He will wait until it was crispy and fragrant, then he would put it into his stomach in small bites. Also, let me ask you a question. Don't you want to eat this orange that was brought to your mouth? Shimei chuckled. You're so stubborn. How did you serve Taxian Jun again? Take it away. I think it's better for you to eat it. You haven't had a drop of water these days and your lips are cracking. Chu Wanning only gritted his teeth and asked, Where's Mo Ran? Shimei stared at him for a while and slowly stopped laughing. Whether it's this life or the other one, whether you have memories of the other life or not, you only have eyes for Mo Ran. He knew he was running his mouth out and immediately stopped. However, he missed the slight tremble in Chu Wanning's face at his slip. Shimei narrowed his eyes. Tell me, what's so good about Mo Ran? He looked down at Chu Wanning, and saw the last bit of blood on his lip slowly fading. That person is reckless and brainless. His thoughts are naive and ridiculous. His character is also not good. What do you see in him? Was it his face? His spiritual power? His sweet mouth? After all, he had suppressed his bestial desires for so long. The more he spoke, the more obvious the smell of blood in his voice became. Especially when he saw Chu Wanning begin to bite his lips, as if trying to suppress some kind of emotion. Shimei felt his mouth dry up. His words began to run wild in a more lascivious direction. Or is it his ability in bed? Anger appeared on Chu Wanning's pale face. His face turned red from fury. Shut up. Shimei did not intend to shut up. He had finally gotten this man, and if he did not thoroughly play with him, how could he stop? He said with a smile, Consort Chu, you still don't know that after you died in the other life, Mo Ran gave you the noble posthumous title of Qingzhen. He was interested in capturing the slightest change of expressions on Chu Wanning's face, and his eyebrows curved more and more. It sounds a bit funny, but it's also quite appropriate. In the end, in this life and the other life, you are indeed pure and he is the only one who has tainted you. But in this way, there is actually no comparison. Shimei said slowly, you have never tried it with anyone else, so naturally you only think that he is the best. His fingertips slid down Chu Wanning's face inch by inch. From the tip of his nose, to his lips, his chin, down to the jut of his throat. Chu Wanning trembled slightly and the veins on his wrists bulged. He wanted to break free from the immortal binding rope, but in the end, he could not move. Don't waste your energy. Noble consort Chu wants to be untied and you want to know Mo Ran's whereabouts, I can satisfy you. He changed the topic, however, you are my spoils of war after all. You should at least play with me for a bit, right? What do you want to do? Shimei smiled, I want to take your mind off from that person a little bit. Don't keep thinking about him, think about me, how about it? You are the person who put the curse in the other life. What is there to think about? If one listened carefully, they would be able to detect the suffocation and pain in Chu Wanning's voice. Chu Wanning seemed to be trying his best to suppress some kind of emotion, but he couldn't stop himself from bursting out. Shimei smiled, that's right, it is me. But noble consort Chu, why don't you guess who my real identity is? If you want to say it, then say it. If you don't want to say it, then forget it. Sigh, when will you stop being so fierce? Shimei sighed and said, how about this? Noble consort Chu once said making huge gamble is harmful to the body but a small bet is good for heart. But if you really want something bad enough, you better be ready for the consequences. Why don't we make a bet? However, Shimei paused, before we begin, I have to make a slight offense and take a look at how many pieces of clothes you are wearing. Although Chu Wanning did not say anything, the exposed lower half of his face involuntarily tensed up. Shimei's expression became even gentler. He counted them one by one, and in the end, he counted a total of 5 pieces. Then I'll give you 5 chances. If you answer correctly within 5 times, I'll tell you where Mo Ran is. After pausing for a moment, he continued, however, every time you get a wrong answer, I'll take off one of your clothes. If noble consort Chu still does not answer correctly after all 5 robes are removed, then. He did not continue and only smiled, his light pink tongue subconsciously licking his lips. Then, he sat there quietly, waiting for Chu Wanning's guess. Chu Wanning did not speak, but he was not in a hurry. He continued to wait calmly. At this moment, he was very free. He had plenty of time. However, as time passed bit by bit, Chu Wanning still did not give any response. Shi Mei raised his eyebrows. He had plenty of time, but he might not have the patience for it. Why don't you guess? Chu Wanning finally said, get lost. Shi Mei's expression became gloomy. Now that you are in my hands, you should know what you can do and what you can't do. Chu Wanning. You don't have the leverage to negotiate with me. Taxian Jun's brain is not good, so he might not be able to argue with you and sometimes let you do as you please. But I am different. Shi Mei coldly said, you are in my hands, so it is better for you to be obedient. He waited for a while, and seeing that Chu Wanning still did not speak, his tone became harsher, don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Don't think that I can't do anything to you if you don't speak. As he said this, his slender white fingers moved up and touched Chu Wanning's waist belt. Then he slowly stroked the belt, his fingertips sliding over it like a knife cutting a fish. Listen, I will count to 3. If you don't speak, you will bear the consequences yourself. Shi Mei said, his eyes shining. He actually did not know whether he wanted Chu Wanning to guess or not. But at this time, it did not matter whether he make guesses. There was no turning back and all he could think about was how to reveal himself. It had to be exciting enough. After all, the man in front of him had fought with him for 2 lifetimes. Now that he had won, he had to carefully lick the fruits of his victory. 1. There seemed to be a glimmer of victory in front of him. 2. How would Chu Wanning feel? Anger? Grief? Fear? He waited and watched, his lips slightly moving. 3. All right, Consort Chu is indeed very virtuous. It's no wonder that Taxian Jun is addicted to you. Shi Mei was half joking and half serious. Since you don't want to guess, let's do something more violent. You. Hua Binan. His voice was cold. Shi Mei's fingers slightly paused. He originally wanted to untie Chu Wanning's waist belt, but then he smiled, your guess is only half right. Continue. He revealed a fox-like craftiness. This kind of craftiness may appear wretched on other people, but she may look so elegant, like a lotus flower shining on the water at all times. He firmly believed that Chu Wanning would not guess the last layer of the truth. He was proud, I would rather you were really dead. Shi Mei's smile froze on his face. After a while, he asked, what did you say? The person on the bed had a very cold voice, without a trace of warmth. In the other world, during the heavenly rift, under that heavy snowfall. I would have preferred if you really died. Shi Mei stared at him, the words he had prepared suddenly had nowhere to go and he could only be speechless. His hand was already half raised and now remained suspended in midair, not knowing how to move forward. He was suddenly at a loss. Shi Mingjing. A soft sigh, but it was like a bee sting to the dazed person, isn't it you? Although it was posed as a question, there was no doubt in his tone. Shi Mei lowered his eyelids and for a moment his expression was unclear. After a while, he chuckled, I didn't die. Sorry I've disappointed you. He did not want to admit defeat, but there was already some flagging interest in his tone. Shi Mei said, I am indeed the Shi Mingjing from the other life. I came from that world, the world of Taxian Jun. I am not the same person as the little friend who has always been by your side. He paused, I'll keep my word and untie you. As he spoke, he untied the immortal binding rope and then put his hand on the ribbon covering Chu Wanning's eyes. With a little force, he took them off. Peach Blossom eyes met Phoenix eyes, and the two looked at each other without any ripples. Greetings to Shizun. Chu Wanning had already prepared himself, but now he was even more gloomy. He looked at him. You still know that I'm your Shizun? Hearing him say this, Shi Mei smiled gently, but only now did he know what kind of sharp dagger was hidden under his gentleness. Yes, of course. You held the umbrella for me, I've never forgotten. Chu Wanning looked very weak, but this did not change the innate determination on his face. He stared at Shi Mei for a long time, and then his lips opened and closed as if his words were being crushed. Then with an extremely cold tone he said, "You bastard." Shi Mei smiled, "You win." He paused, and then asked again, "But when did Shizun guess my identity? From the other life?" Chu Wanning did not answer, and only looked at him coldly. There was anger in those eyes, but the most abundant was disappointment. Shi Mei pondered, "No, it can't be. If you knew that I was Hua Binan in the other life, you would have told Hui Zhui when you opened a rift through time and space." He raised his eyelashes. "It's in this life. Or should I say, not too long ago? When you were at Mount Longxiu, didn't you more or less hear the conversation between Mo Ran and me? Forget it, it's not important." Shi Mei smiled, "In any case, you're in my hands now, and you can't escape." Chu Wanning grew more and more silent. In fact, among his three disciples, Shi Mei was the one he couldn't see through the most. At that time, he accepted Shi Mei as his disciple because he was respectful, gentle, care about other people's worries and treat other people kindly. These were the qualities that Chu Wanning admired greatly. He could not do it himself, so he admired it in others even more. However, there were times when he couldn't help but feel like something was amiss. For example, Xue Zhenyang said that Shi Mei was an orphan he picked up whilst in the chaos of a war. However, when Shi Mei talked about his life experiences, he would sometimes say something that did not make sense or does not tie up with someone of that background. That kind of attitude was very much like someone who told a lie and then forgot the details. There were also times when Shi Mei's attitude towards things would suddenly become a little strange, like a well-tamed ferocious dog. It looked obedient, but once it smelled blood, it could not help but show a murderous look. But after observing for a few years, he had never seen Shi Mei do anything wicked, and Chu Wanning decided that he was probably wrong and that he mistook a beautiful person for a green-faced fanged beast. He himself was like a hedgehog, his whole body was very sharp and only his abdomen was soft. He hid his disciples and all the people who treated him well, under his soft abdomen. When it came to Shi Mei though, he had wavered between trust and distrust. He also had reservations and tested him, but in the end, he chose to trust him. So now the knife stabbed into the hedgehog's abdomen and blood flowed out. Shi Mei asked, "How much of the other life did you know?" He asked again, "Why didn't you just stand by and watch? Why did you have to stop me?" There were too many resentments in the other life, and finally he had the opportunity to ask. Shi Mei did not want to stop and asked endlessly, "Why didn't you kill Taxian Jun in the end and even help him resurrect?" Hearing the last sentence, Chu Wanning finally raised his eyes. "He is different from you." Shi Mei paused for a moment. "What difference? If you say that I have a vicious mind, isn't his hands full of blood?" Chu Wanning stared at him. "You are the one who planted the demon flower in him. You know it yourself. So what? Even if I was the one who planted the demon flower, isn't he the one who killed people?" Shi Mei said, "You saw it yourself in the other life. Xue Zhenyang, Wang Chuking, Zhang Shi, Ye Wangzi, who killed these people?" He slowly raised his hand and looked at his slender fingers with round nails. Such soft, delicate, and clean fingers, without a speck of dust. Shi Mei narrowed his eyes and laughed. "Could it be me?" Anger surged and Chu Wanning was speechless for a moment. "I don't want to massacre the Rufeng sect, nor did I want to kill Xue Zhenyang. So, you shouldn't look for me to collect debts." Shimei said, "What did I do? I just planted the demon flower in him. I have lived for so long, but I have never killed anyone with my own hands." Shimei continued with a smile, "So, in the end, he was the one who took up the sword and cut down people. It doesn't have anything to do with me. That hate, sufferings and everlasting hatred flower did not create new hatred. All those feelings and desires belong to himself. The demon flower only magnified them. If you want to blame this on me, I will feel wronged." With every sentence he spoke, the disgust in Chu Wanning's heart increased. In the end, when he heard that he actually felt wronged, Chu Wanning suddenly raised his eyes. His gaze was as cold as ice. "What right do you have to feel wronged? He was the one who did it. Why should Shizun blame me?" "Don't you know what kind of person he is?" Chu Wanning asked. Shimei said, "Of course I know what kind of person he is. The one who doesn't know him is you, Shizun." A strand of white silk from the orange got stuck between his fingers. Shimei found it dirty, so he took out a clean white handkerchief and wiped it. Then, he raised them one by one. "Why did Mo Ran massacre the Rufeng sect? Because he has hatred in his heart." "Why did Mo Ran kill Xue Zhenyang? Because he has fear in his heart." "Why did Mo Ran humiliate you? Because he has desires in his heart." As Shimei said this, he glanced at Chu Wanning. When someone stabbed him, he couldn't forgive them. When someone gave him benefits, he couldn't reject it. In front of a beauty, he couldn't restrain his desires. This is his nature. Chu Wanning gritted his teeth and said, "Shi Mingjing. You erased his pure kindness, magnified the hatred in his heart by 10,000 times, and then said that everything he did was because of his own desires. You're so outrageous. Who wouldn't destroy the world when their hatred is magnified to the extreme? You. Then who made him have hatred? Who made him have ambition in his bones? Who made him have desires in his heart?" Shimei laughed. If his heart was as pure as a child, he wouldn't have any bad intentions. That hate, sufferings and everlasting hatred flower wouldn't be able to stir anything. So, you should blame him for having a dirty mind, for being no different from the most common man. Hearing this, Chu Wanning's expression became very ugly. He was about to speak again when Shimei added another sentence. "People have to be responsible for their own desires. There's nothing to argue about this." If Chu Wanning had wanted to talk sense to him before, at this point, he suddenly felt that there was no need to say anything, as it wasn't worth it. Chu Wanning turned his face away. Shimei saw his expression and shook his head. "Shizun, you're too biased towards him. In your eyes, he has a reason for everything he does, and that it's understandable. Then tell me, who should I understand?" Chu Wanning was extremely cold as he continued, "You." Shimei was silent for a moment, then smiled. "So Shizun still likes him." Chu Wanning's gaze was like the reflection of the moon on an icy lake. "So, in the other life and this life, I competed for Shizun for 2 lives. Even if I won, I still couldn't compare to him." Chu Wanning said coldly, "What do you have to compare to him?" Shimei narrowed his eyes. "Do you really only have these few words to say about me? Nothing else?" Chu Wanning didn't immediately reply. Looking at his expression, he seemed to be seriously thinking for a moment. Then he raised the curtain of his eyelashes, and said extremely cold and calm, "There's more." Shimei smiled. "What is it?" Chu Wanning said expressionlessly, "You don't have to compare yourself to Mo Ran. You can't even compare to Su Xuanglin. At least he still has feelings and dares to admit his wrongdoings. He's not like you, Hua Binan." In the end, he didn't even address him as Shi Mingjing anymore. Chu Wanning continued, "You're just a bastard through and through." End chapter. Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 254. Mount Longxiu, missing you. Shimei suddenly shut his mouth, his snow-white cheeks twitching slightly, as if he was humiliated by a slap. But he still pursed his lips and said, "You really don't leave me any face." As he spoke, his hand touched Chu Wanning's chin again, but Chu Wanning avoided it like he was being touched by a poisonous scorpion. Shi Mei narrowed his eyes. For a moment, a storm was brewing on his face, but in the end, it calmed down like a placid lake. "Let's not talk about this anymore." After calming down, the former disciple still had that gentle face. "Anyway, you're just a stubborn person. You wanted to kill him in your previous life, right? But in the end, you didn't have the heart. You even put a portion of your soul into his heart before you died." Shi Mei wasn't wrong. That year, during the life and death battle in Kunlun Taxia Palace, when Chu Wanning touched Mo Ran's forehead with his fingertips for the last time, it was actually to transfer a wisp of his soul into Mo Ran. In that life, his soul has been divided into many portions and was scattered. A portion was left in Mo Ran's body, another to himself of this life, and the other was passed on to Taxian Jun with a faint hope. Chu Wanning didn't know if it was still possible to interfere with the demon flower's influence at its third stage, but he thought that since the flower was nurtured by the caster's soul to bloom, then if he used his own soul to nurture it, there might be some changes. He was nothing more than a ruined body at that point. He had done everything he could and should have done. He had always been decisive in his convictions, and the only one who was soft-hearted was actually Mo Weiyu. Because there was still a glimmer of hope to save him, he didn't kill him in the end. He didn't hesitate to give up his broken soul, only hoping to bring the former Mo Ran back. Even though he didn't know if it would work at that time. As if he saw through his inner thoughts, Shi Mei smiled and said, "With what you did, although you didn't get rid of the demon flower in Mo Ran's heart, you've indeed managed to disturb his emotion, causing him to be torn between what's good and what's evil, which ultimately drove him mad and made him commit suicide." Chu Wanning's expression changed slightly as he raised his eyes. In fact, thinking back to the Taxian Jun he met on Mount Jiao, who was without a heartbeat, he could more or less guess what had happened to Mo Ran in the other life. But when he heard that he had committed suicide, he still felt a dull pain in his heart. Shi Mei looked at him and continued, "Shizun, you did it. You did protect him. I don't even know what happened, but his soul was resurrected into the past. Sigh, I still don't understand it. At that time, you were just a cripple. How did you ruin my plan? You really surprised me." His eyelashes, which were as soft as cattail leaves, drooped down. He moved closer, as if he wanted to kiss Chu Wanning. Chu Wanning suddenly came back to his senses. Like a flash of lightning he raised his hand to choke Shi Mei's throat. The veins on the back of his hand bulged. Shi Mei's expression didn't change at all. He casually grabbed Chu Wanning's wrist, as if he had expected Chu Wanning to have such a reaction. He laughed. "What's wrong? Does Shizun wanted to ruin me a second time, a third time? Unfortunately, it's already too late. It's already impossible." As soon as his voice fell, the sound of a snake hissing could be heard. A golden ringed snake flew out of Shi Mei's wide sleeve and viciously bit Chu Wanning's arm. It was unknown what kind of tampering the snake had been through. With just one bite, the pain was unbearable. Chu Wanning's hand lost strength. Shi Mei grabbed his wrist and tied him to the bedpost in an even more humiliating position than before. "You don't need to worry. This snake is not poisonous." Shi Mei tied his hands and then slowly sat up. His cold white fingertips stroked the snake's body. His peach blossom eyes slanted. "This snake was specially raised for you. One bite and you'll lose all strength. I respect Shizun, but this is all I can do." Shi Mei raised his hand and the snake slipped back into his sleeve and disappeared. "Speaking of which, in my previous life, I had no choice but to let you stay by Mo Weiyu's side for so long. I was actually very reluctant to do that." He stood up and calmly began to take off his cloak, then his outer robe, and then Chu Wanning's expression suddenly changed. He was extremely disgusted. "Shi Mingjing. Shi Mei only gently smiled and walked closer to Chu Wanning. Let me tell you a little secret. In the other life, when you got married, I attended the banquet as Hua Binan. Although Taxian Jun had his own selfish motives and covered your face with red silk so that the guests couldn't see your appearance and only knew that he married a consort Chu, I knew that it was you. So that day, after the banquet, I didn't leave. I went to the Red Lotus Pavilion. And then he came in. Shi Mei's eyes flashed with light. At that time, although he was under the influence of the demon flower, he could control his thoughts and emotions. So, I couldn't let him discover me. I hid and didn't leave. Chu Wanning was trembling because of anger and also because of extreme disgust. Shi Mei sat down and a pair of cold and slender hands slowly stroked his chest. Did you know? His voice was slightly hoarse and there was a hint of greed in his eyes. His fingertips moved down inch by inch until they stopped at Chu Wanning's abdomen and began to untie the belt around his waist. That night, you were lying under him. He applied aphrodisiac on you and fucked you until you moaned, "Tisk, really?" Shi Mei's eyes were red because of lust. You've made me so thirsty for 2 lifetimes. Chu Wanning felt extremely humiliated, but the overlapping of the memories of 2 lifetimes caused him to lose a lot of energy. Furthermore, he was bitten by the golden-ringed snake, so he didn't have any strength in his body. He gritted his teeth. Shi Mingjing, you bastard. Get out of here. Shi Mei chuckled, it's just going to bed, why are you so fierce? Anyway, you've already slept with your own disciple. You don't have to pretend to be reserved. Get lost. Lying down to serve 1 disciple, or 2, what's the difference? Shi Mei was unruffled. I don't mind, so why don't you just enjoy it? For all you know, my skills might not be any worse than his. You. Before he finished speaking, a cold voice came from the door. Get the hell out of here. Chu Wanning looked like he was struck by lightning. He suddenly raised his head and saw that the stone door was already open. A man whose face he couldn't see clearly was holding a black gold saber, standing against the light outside the half-open door of the secret room. He looked cold and tall, with a straight back. Shi Mei narrowed his eyes. You? So fast. The man stepped in with heavy steps, wrapped in a cold air. For a moment, the lights in the room flickered and the candlelight shone on his black leather battle robe, making it look cold. At this time, he could finally see his appearance clearly. He had a pair of slender legs, which were tightly wrapped in combat boots. His thin waist was wrapped with a silver dragon head belt and there was a pure silver concealed weapon box. There were sharp gauntlets on his wrists and he wore black dragon scale gloves. Further up was a handsome face and the heroic spirit between his eyebrows was almost extravagant. It's Taxian Jun. The emperor exuded a kind of cold and bloody aura, as if he had just returned from the battlefield. He raised his eyes and there was even blood splatter on his pale cheeks. His eyes were like a pair of bayonets, staring at the 2 people on the bed. To be precise, he just glanced at Chu Wanning and then his eyes pierced straight at Shi Mingjing, shining with cold light. Get out. Seeing him enter the room, Shi Mei's face was cold at first, then he straightened up and sat up slowly. Did you kill all the people I asked you to get rid of in Gaiyuye sect? I killed enough. As Taxian Jun walked towards them, he bit the edge of the glove with his white teeth and took it off, revealing his well-proportioned hand underneath. He threw the blood-stained gloves on the table, stared at Shi Mei and said coldly, know your place before this venerable one. Shi Mei's expression was also ugly as he said, you better know who you are talking to. This venerable one could only tell if he is happy or not. Taxian Jun said coldly, you are in the wrong bed, get out. Since when is it your turn to order me around? Taxian Jun said dangerously, this venerable one have always been like this. Shi Mei seemed to be a little angry as his eyes flashed. I am your master. So what? Mount Jiao belongs to me and the person on the bed is also mine. Taxian Jun looked down at Shi Mingjing and said with a mocking smile, "Master, please get lost." Taxian Jun and Shi Mingjing went back and forth, tit for tat with sparks flying everywhere. Chu Wanning didn't know what was going on, so he silently observed from the side. Shi Mingjing just said that Taxian was already dead and that the one in front of him was nothing but a chess piece, a living puppet. As he listened, it came to his mind that the one that he tried to save from the 8 sufferings and everlasting hatred flower was the Mo-Ran of this life. Taxian Jun of the other life was already deeply poisoned by the demon flower. He had long since been unable to recover from its effects. So, logically speaking, that Mo-Ran should be deeply in love with Shimei. However, by the way they are interacting now, it seemed that Taxian Jun didn't care about Shi Mingjing at all. There's also the matter of Shi Mingjing being Taxian Jun's master. What was that about? At this moment, Shimei stared at the Taxian Jun for a while, then sneered and got up to put on his clothes. He was very clear on the information that Chu Wanning did not know. In the other life, when Mo-Ran committed suicide, he lost his claws and fangs. So, he refined Mo-Ran's body and the remnants of his soul with medical cultivation and turned him into a living dead. This living dead was similar to that of a Zhenlong chess piece that he would listen to his command and retained all the consciousness he had when he was still alive. But he didn't know exactly what went wrong. Maybe he has suffered through a lot while he was still alive, or that his body was badly damaged, or that his mind has gone through so many drastic changes that in the heart of Taxian Jun, his understanding of Shimei's entity became extremely chaotic. Sometimes he would think that Shimei was alive for a while and then he thought that Shimei was dead for a while. Sometimes he even temporarily forgot who Shimei was, that even when he was directly facing Hua Binan, he wouldn't recognize that this was Shimei and simply thought that this was his master. And he wasn't very willing to listen to his master. "I really don't know what to do with you." Shimei walked forward, poked Taxian Jun's forehead and recited, "Soul scatter." After this incantation and this action, Taxian Jun froze and his originally sharp eyes suddenly became slack, losing focus in an instant. "You're obviously my puppet, but you're becoming more and more disobedient. You always defy me and even try to fight me off." Shimei patted his cold face, "But forget it, I don't blame you, you're not complete to begin with." Taxian Jun remained quiet. "Just bear with it for a while." Shimei said, "Once I get a hold of that, I will reforge you. After that, you won't able to defy me anymore." After he said that, his control over Taxian Jun reached its limit. This speed of recovery made Shimei's face more and more gloomy. He didn't expect that in such a short time, Taxian Jun's eyes would regain their luster. It even became more resolute and colder than before. This kind of cold and oppressive gaze focused on Shimei. Taxian Jun paused for a moment, narrowed his eyes and then wrinkled his nose, looking like a cheetah waiting to be served food. He then said, "Why haven't you left yet?" As he said this, his slender fingers pinched the handle of Bulletin Gui. "Do you want to end up as this venerable one's target?" Shimei didn't reply anything more to him, or it could be said that Taxian Jun's anger was so deep that even if he was the master, Shi Mingjing knew that he couldn't reign in the Taxian Jun in this state. If this Lord of Darkness were to go berserk, it would truly be terrifying. Shimei left. After he left, Taxian Jun stared at Chu Wanning, who was on the bed for a long time, with a vague and strange expression. It was as if he was trying to restrain himself but also couldn't help but desire something. Finally, he sat down, reached out his hand and held Chu Wanning's waist. After a pause, he didn't know how to continue, so he pursed his lips and changed his words. "You." Chu Wanning looked at him, their gazes locked onto each other for a long time and he still didn't say anything. Slowly, he blinked his slightly sore eyes. "Ahem, I have something important to tell you." "Go ahead." Taxian Jun hesitated for a moment, and then said resolutely, "Actually, it's not very important, so forget about it." After a while, he spoke again with a more determined expression, "It doesn't matter if it's important or not. Since you want to know so much, there's no harm in telling you." Chu Wanning. Actually, what I wanted to say. Taxian Jun took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and said in an extremely stiff voice, "I wanted to say that after so many years, it seems that I do miss you a little." Then he quickly added, "But I don't think it was too much, just a little." After he said the last line, that handsome but pale face immediately showed an extremely regretful expression. Chu Wanning stared at him in a daze. With 2 lifetimes worth of memories and souls intertwining, he didn't even know in what way should he face this man. But Taxian Jun didn't give him much time to dwell on it. He seemed to be a little irritated as he untied the ropes around Chu Wanning's hands and pulled him over. He placed a large hand on the back of Chu Wanning's head, tugging and caressing it. Then, he impatiently and passionately pressed a kiss on him. Taxian Jun's lips were cold but his desire burned hot. In this impulsive and anxious kiss, the memories of the past overlapped with each other. Chu Wanning was kissed by him. These 2 broken people with broken souls who were separated by 2 lifetimes finally kissed and come together. While he was being held within Taxian Jun's arms and being kissed, a lot of thoughts came into Chu Wanning's mind. However, it seemed that his mind has gone blank, unable to gather and organize these thoughts. However, he knew that tears gathered in his eyes. It didn't matter whether it was right or wrong, good or evil. Things had become difficult to define. Everything was no longer clear. But when he kissed this man who no longer had any warmth, he knew. Taxian Jun didn't lie to him. Mo Ran didn't lie to him. He really did miss him. End chapter.